And we're back with more News Talk Saga 960. So very glad you could join us on this edition of the Mark Petrone Show. Well, it's been a number of months since the convoy ended, but there is still a lot of concern, let's just say. In fact, in some quarters, there is still outrage over the decision to freeze the accounts of literally hundreds of people who are either sympathized with the convoy or actively participated in it. They're still wondering why it was that their accounts were frozen. Well, now we have one of the banks, one of the big five, Scotiabank, as a matter of fact, issuing a form of apology to one of the convoy organizers, in this case, Benjamin Dichter. And basically what they're saying is we're sorry about the frustration that was caused as far as it transpired. But they also did something else. They also pointed to the RCMP, which is to say, well, it was kind of their idea anyway. We have Benjamin Dichter on the show today, and BJ coming to us from Colombia, as a matter of fact, the country of Colombia. And so, Benjamin, you were given an apology of sort. You were sent an apology by Scotiabank for, I guess, the frustration, the inconvenience associated with being targeted for one of these bank freezes. Talk a little bit about what happened.
Well, basically, at the time that the bank accounts were frozen, mine was one of many, about 300 people, if I'm not mistaken. I actually sent a letter to the president of Scotiabank and to the president of TD, asking for clarification and under asking for which law guided their decision to freeze our bank accounts, and explain specifically why it was done, and CC'd my lawyers on those emails. To Scotiabank's credit, they actually responded, and they responded on March the 3rd. And I kept that for a little while because I wanted to see how the government would act. And we saw them all trying to pass the hot potato where the government was blaming the RCMP. The RCMP was saying it wasn't us. And then FinTrack saying, well, it wasn't us. And everybody trying to blame each other. And I thought, well, now is a good time to show that, well, according to one of the big banks, they seem to indicate, not explicitly, but they inferred that it was under the directive of the RCMP, or at least they seem to understand it that way. I figured now is a good time to explain to everybody, while they're all trying to toss around the hot potato and say it wasn't me, say, well, here's the banks weighing in. Now what do you think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Scotiabank, and I'm going to read part of the story. I actually wrote the story for your publication, the National Telegraph. Scotiabank is the first of the big five banks to issue an apology over the freezing of bank accounts belonging to a trucker convoy protesters. In an email from the office of the CEO of Scotiabank, Brian J. Porter, asked protest spokesperson Benjamin Dichter to please accept our sincere apologies for the frustration and inconvenience this situation may have caused, and thank you for your patience while we prepared our response. It goes on to say, I don't believe the banks went out of their way to target clients. This is your quote. I believe it came from somewhere else. They didn't do it on their own accord, Dichter said. Okay, so I know you're not giving the banks a pass here, but in a way you're saying that they were unwilling accomplices. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not somebody who's normally sympathetic to banks. I mean, we all have good and bad relationships depending on what we're doing. But at the same time, the global banking industry, not just in Canada, in the finance world, has been complaining about excessive government overreach and government regulation. And well, maybe this is just another case that steelmans their argument that here we have a group of people who are not charged with any crimes, we're not arrested, we're not nothing, but it seems to be, if what they're telling me is the truth, that they felt that they had no choice and acted under the directive of the government, the RCMP. I don't know, but let's find out, right? So I thought that was it was just very interesting to me that, and again, to their credit, TD didn't even bother to respond. So to the credit of the CEO of Scotiabank, for he or having his staff, whomever, at least responding to the inquiry. So that's a good step in the right direction as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I guess it would be great to get the RCMP to kind of weigh in on this, because they've been getting it from all sides. Of course, the
That's
government
right.
had blamed the RCMP for giving them the advice that led to the Emergencies Act being implemented, if you want to say, or imposed on the people of Canada for the first time ever. And then you had Brenda Lucki, commissioner of the RCMP, saying, well, no, we didn't tell the government to impose the Emergencies Act. And so you have a bit of a divergence of opinion there. And so the government is trying to basically use the police as an excuse for why they did what they did. The RCMP says, well, no, we didn't tell you guys to do it. And then the Ottawa police weighed in as well and said, well, we didn't tell you to do it either. And now you have the bank saying, well, freezing the accounts wasn't our idea. In fact, we unfroze them first opportunity. As soon as we were given the go ahead by the RCMP, then we unfroze them. So this is the weird part, right? They didn't actually came out and say, yeah, we froze the accounts. They said we unfroze them, and we were quick about it.
Exactly.
So exactly what happened here. They're using very, very careful language designed to absolve themselves of any blame.
Of course.
But somebody's got to wear it, and it seems this time Brenda Lucki and the commissioner of the RCMP is not that eager to say, yeah, all right, it was our fault. It was us. We asked for it. And we also ordered the freezing the accounts. So everybody's kind of playing pass the buck here, aren't they?
Because they know they're all in a lot of trouble, and this is not going away anytime soon. They think we're all going to stop asking these questions and pushing forward. They are sorely mistaken, because there are a lot of people across the political spectrum, by the way, but a lot of people of significant wealth and influence and power who are not happy that the fact that the government went to this level. And if they think, the bureaucrats think, that they're going to be able to hide from that, they're not. And the more they try to pass the buck, the worse it's going to be for them. So let's take the case of the RCMP, for example. Okay, let's assume the RCMP did request that financial institutions freeze all the assets. And again, not just bank accounts, credit cards, lines of credit, corporate accounts, everything got frozen by everybody who had absolutely every means of transacting. If the RCMP did it on their own accord, you telling me Brenda Lucki just decide, hey, we're going to freeze the accounts? Brenda Lucki was put in place to be a lapdog for the Trudeau regime. We all know that. Everybody in policing knows that, which is fine. That's what she was put there. That's why she was hired, whatever. But who is it within the government, if it was the RCMP, that put pressure on her or others within the RCMP to restrict the bank accounts? Because there's a lot of Canadians, left, right, center, libertarian, unaffiliated, non-politically affiliated, who are kind of ticked off that the government thinks it has this much power and it can do this at their will whenever they want. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting story as well from Fortune magazine. Trudeau's emergency orders aimed at freezing the funds of the Freedom Convoy caught the banks off guard. This was a story that dates back to February. This was just a couple of days after the government imposed the Emergencies Act, froze the accounts. And this seems to follow in with the idea that the banks were unwilling accomplices in all of this. And I think it certainly is, I believe, evidenced by the letter that you got by Scotiabank, which is saying, well, we're sorry about this. But are you surprised? I think in the story you said you were surprised that you did get this letter. I mean, do you expect other banks to follow suit, or are they saying, well, no, we're not sorry, because why would we be sorry when it wasn't our fault? You know what I mean? So by apologizing to Scotiabank has essentially kind of accepted some responsibility, even though if you parse the language in the quotes, they're really kind of punting it over the RCMP.
Well, again, that's why I said I give Scotiabank some credit for this, as opposed to TD or other banks, for at least acknowledging it and trying to, I guess, in their eyes, from a public relations standpoint, trying to make amends and obviously have some concern over their reputation. And much like the article you just pointed out, that indicates that many of these banks felt as though they were caught off guard and they had no choice. Well, that just kind of adds credence to what seems to be what they're inferring by this letter. So I don't know. I think no matter where you are on the political spectrum, if the government thinks that they can at will just decide to cut people off from their money, don't you, people who are listening, don't you think it's time that the people in power, not just the politicians, but the bureaucrats behind the scenes, suffer some repercussions or punishment for this if it can't be accounted for in a legal manner? Like, I think so. And at least there has to be some level of inquiry in specifically into this issue and how they could just go in and decide, okay, you're caught off from your money. So, and again, that's why I'm trying, it is not politically partisan. And I am sympathetic to the position that the banks were in, and specifically Scotiabank in this case. But we need to know more. And we're clearly not getting any answers from these inquiries at Parliament Hill, where everybody's trying to pass the buck and say, well, it wasn't us. I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. We're not going to accept that.
Yeah, and a lot of this happened under the specter of the banks losing perhaps even millions of dollars as people pulled money out of the country.
What was
But
it, between 1.2, 1.4 trillion dollars apparently was pulled out of the Canadian banking
yeah,
sector during that week?
I mean that's astonishing if it's true. I mean, I have no verification of that number, but if they had even billions of dollars in redemptions and people saying there's no way. I mean, if this country now is run by Hugo Chavez and the banks are in his pocket, then you could come after me next. You went after BJ. Well, maybe I'm next on the hit list if I do something the government doesn't like. I mentioned the parsing of language in the quote here by the Scotiabank. We can confirm that financial institutions acted quickly to unfreeze accounts after the RCMP notified us that it believes that individuals and entities previously identified are no longer engaged in conduct or activities prohibited under the emergency measures regulation. It says, yeah, we can confirm that financial institutions acted quickly to unfreeze accounts. Well, who are they speaking for? I mean, is the Scotiabank speaking for all the banks here? Or are they speaking for themselves? I mean, when it says we can confirm that financial institutions acted quickly, well, you know what? You can speak for yourself, but it's interesting. It's almost like they're trying to separate themselves from any accountability or responsibility for what happened. You know what I'm saying? This is the tenor of the language here, and they didn't talk about we only froze the accounts after the police asked us. They just said we were quick to unfreeze them. Well, if they were quick to unfreeze them, I guess they're the ones who froze them in the first place. I mean,
They were quick to freeze them as well.
yeah, I mean, after they were asked. But I mean, we're in the midst of an inquiry as to whether or not the Emergencies Act was justifiable under the circumstances or not, and to the degree that the judge overseeing this inquiry is going to delve into the banking aspect. I don't know. To what degree is that part of all this, or is it just about declaring the Emergencies Act, not so much the impact financially speaking on everybody else? I don't know, but I think it's a huge question, because I think the banks are still scrambling in the aftermath of what happened, the freezing of the accounts, the Emergencies Act, still kind of scrambling to do damage control. Fair?
Yeah, I agree. Again, this has not gone without notice around the world, not just inside Canada. And I mean, I happen to know a number of people within the financial sector who I've spoken to on numerous occasions who are very, very concerned and use some very direct language in terms with how the government behaved and how the financial sector behaved. And again, they want to have answers like the rest of us do. And when you explain that, the wording is designed to kind of absolve them of any responsibility and defer to somebody else. Well, that wouldn't be the first time a bank did that in any sort of press release. So I'm not entirely surprised, but whatever, it is what it is. But I thought it was important for people to know that this apology was issued and that they did, maybe not directly or indirectly, infer that it was at the very least the RCMP or the government itself. So the RCMP and the government are not allowed to go hide in the corner during these inquiries, and that somebody actually takes them to task and asks them very direct questions. And I'm more than willing to send off this letter to somebody on that committee panel to say, hey, here's an exhibit of evidence that you guys can use in your questioning to try to dig a little bit deeper, because that's what they're supposed to be doing.
Benjamin Dichter joining us on Saga 960 and the Mark Petronis Show. We've been speaking about this apparent apology, although it's kind of sorry, not sorry sort of thing, or sorry you feel bad. It's not like the kind of blanket apology, like we really screwed up here and we're never going to do it again. No, I don't. That's not the kind of apology we're getting here, but it is an apology. It is like, so, there are implications to that. When you're regretting, you're expressing a regret to your client, saying it sucked and we apologize for that. At least it shows like the banks are sending an olive branch to the trucker convoy, but it's not because they're nice people. I think it's because they're worried about the long-standing implications of what they did to their business, right? The trust aspect with future clients, where does that go? And so I think that's really at play here in terms of the future of the banking sector. And what if this happens again? What if there's another protest? I mean, could there be a lawsuit somewhere down the road as people look back and think, well, I suffered personally humiliation. I mean, in your case, you went to buy some groceries, did you not? And found that's how you found out. You found out the hard way. I mean, that's pretty embarrassing when you go pay for your stuff and your card is rejected.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, what do we expect? We've seen this government go tyrannical in just about every area of governance. Why not for the financial sector? And that's also why people like, if you know who Anthony Pompliano is, like you and I talk periodically about Bitcoin, as he described Justin Trudeau as the chief marketing officer for Bitcoin, because now he's laid the case that, all right, well, they can turn off your banking at any time, cut you off from your money. From their perspective, it's just money that they allow you to use, as long as you have the right political opinion. And well, Bitcoin doesn't suffer from that, and that's why there was a huge march into Bitcoin from a lot of people who are newbies. I get so many emails and inquiries, and you've been in our Twitter spaces too. When people are all newbies, they listen, I don't trust the government anymore. I need to have an additional hedge. I'm not going to put all my money, but I can put a little bit in just for emergency keeping sort of thing. Well, that's all thanks to Justin Trudeau destroying the reputation of the Canadian banking sector. So thank you. And that's why, again, I sympathize with Scotiabank, a public company. They have shareholders. They have a reputation that's important. And trust amongst their clients is very, very important. And now they're caught between a rock and a hard place. Are they a nationalized institution that works at the behest of the government, or are they a private organization that is going to serve its clients and the free market? I don't know.
Yeah, I think a lot of the business that they had is gone for good. I don't see people going back to Scotiabank who pulled their money out, and that certainly applies to all the other banks.
Well, yeah, not just Scotiabank. I mean, all the others and the ones that didn't respond, right?
Yeah.
That just felt that they can just ignore it and move on. Not my problem. Okay.
Yeah, there was this story as well. Almost $6 million in Freedom Convoy money captured as months-long injunction ends. This story dates back to May the 3rd. It was on the state broadcaster, which continues to be an apologist for the government's implementation and imposition of the Emergencies Act and the seizure and the freezing of funds. A months-old injunction against Freedom Convoy organizers ended Monday, but the lawyers responsible for muting incessant honking in February are focused on expanding and certifying a proposed class action lawsuit to ensure Ottawa residents. And okay, yeah, it's always about from the state broadcaster's vantage point. It's all about the damage you guys caused, the incessant honking,
Yeah, yeah. A day and a half of honking. Yeah, a day and a half of honking has ruined everybody's. Like, come on. Yeah, I mean, you know how many people I've had reach out to me from Ottawa saying I was in Ottawa. It was the best thing ever. I was in downtown Ottawa. I was in a hotel, right? Because I broke my leg. I was in a wheelchair, and the first night when everybody arrived, because people were arriving throughout the night, there was honking. There's no question, but it's nowhere near to the degree that the victims, the perpetual victims at the CBC are trying to indicate that, oh, no, it was a night, it was the next day for what, half a day. And it was very quick that then there was that class action suit, and the judge ruled that, well, honking should be limited to one certain area because that's part of your right to protest, but honking throughout the city. But at that time, it had already ended. Because guess what? Guess what? Truckers need to sleep too. Everybody needs to sleep. So, of course, it wasn't 24 hours honking. Like, it's so ridiculous. Once again, it's another indication of how the far left doesn't understand human motivation and doesn't understand how people work. They only understand collectivist worldviews. That's it.
Yeah. But I guess it begs the point: how far is this going to go in terms of allocating blame? Right? They got the police saying it wasn't us. You got the government saying it was the cops. You got the banks saying we only did it because the RCMP told us to do. I mean, where does it all end? You know what I mean? And will the media hold these people to account? I think we're at the point now where they all just want it to go away, right? They want to almost like pretend it didn't happen. And then, but then of course you also have the CBC coming out saying, well, those poor people in Ottawa, they suffered so much because of these truckers. I guess the question begs, you guys didn't really get what you wanted in the end because the vaccine mandates are still in place, even though the government continues to get beaten up over it. They've shown little indication that they're going to pull these things. I mean, do you anticipate another protest at some point or not?
Well, the first thing is you mentioned the media, and who's to say the media is not going to be held to account? They think they're going to get off. The CBC thinks they're going to get off with this. They are sorely mistaken. This is the political cartel that has operated in unison, in sync with each other for too long, and everybody is fed up. And it's not just people who are in the Freedom Convoy who are pissed off. A majority of people have had enough with it. So, is there going to be another protest? I would say no. Everybody on the radical lefties, you can all calm down. Everybody just calm down. There's no protest. There are other, as Christopher Friedland says, tools that can be used for us to get the answers that we want. And there's an increasing number of people who do want answers, despite what the fake news media might try to convince people of through some narrative that more people are against the convoy than they were. Well, it seems to be going in the other direction. And the other thing I would push back a little bit on is in terms of we didn't get what we wanted. Look, if you remember prior to the convoy, the country was going in the wrong direction. Doug Ford, who, by the way, is up for re-election in 4 days and imposed an injunction on donations to the Freedom Convoy. So I hope everybody who claims to be a conservative remembers that. Doug Ford had imposed another lockdown, 4 or 6 weeks prior, something like that. There were digital passports all over the country, increasing in various provinces, including Ontario. I think Alberta even had it at that time or was talking about it. And we were discussing, having more booster shots and more, restrictions on freedom. And then the convoy arrived. And after the first, if I remember the days correctly, because it was a very busy time and kind of foggy at times, but after about a week or so is when you started to see the provincial leaders start to test messaging of going the opposite direction. I think Jason Kenney was the first, if I'm not mistaken, to say, well, maybe there's no need for these passports, and then the various other jurisdictions did the same. And then ultimately, what did they do? They dropped the provincial COVID passports. They dropped the mask mandates, not immediately. They rolled it out slowly. That's why I was putting all over Twitter, hashtag, every time they would do that, hashtag nothing to do with truckers, eh? So we went in the complete opposite direction. And the only fools who hold on to this ideological belief are the extremists in the federal government, which would be Trudeau and Jerry and Omar. I mean, extremists is the only way to describe them, because they never even factor what is the opposition or what do other Canadians other than themselves think, because they're authoritarian monsters. So the only direction they can go is in one direction. And I predict it's going to ruin their political careers. It's ruined Trudeau's career all over the world. I mean, what's he, a 15% approval rating in Canada, if I'm not mistaken? That's the number they're always trying to hide, the CBC's trying to hide. If he had any sort of moral value whatsoever, he would have already resigned at this point with such a low approval rating. He gets mocked all over the world. He gets called blackface everywhere he goes, except for downtown Toronto or downtown Ottawa, or I guess downtown Vancouver, but I think even they are not so happy with him now. Those few downtown centers think, oh, well, he's not bad, because they have, much like the extremists in power, they're extremists in their worldview, and they too don't listen to people who may disagree with them on issues. But that's becoming an increasingly small subsect of the population, as I and many other people have started to build bridges with and work with people who have differing political values, but we agree on one thing: we need to start talking and communicating with each other, and not shaming each other, and start to listen to one another. At least there's some people starting to do that.
I want to ask you, do you think that the convoy emboldened and set the stage for the kind of protests that we're seeing now? I mean, Justin Trudeau's getting protested, yelled at, screamed at. Jagmeet Singh was in Brampton recently. This is what it sounded like.
We got questions. Who's starting anything? Don't get out of your head, bro. Don't say that out loud. Hey, yo, don't be weak. No, we got questions. We got questions. Running Fudger thing. That's what you mean. Fudger thing. Questions, bro. Fake feet, you flat face, the wrong time. Jagmeet, I'm wearing a mask, bro. You gotta respect me. Hey, Jagmeet, don't sell out, bro. Don't sell out. Where you going? Where you going, pussy?
Okay, so
I hear they're all calling him Sellout Singh.
Sellout Singh, and he's tweeting like mad now, trying to show everybody he's still the people's guy. He never was, but to me, this is a continuation of the convoy. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not much into identity politics, although we all have friends from various different communities, because that's just the nature of how Canada is in metropolitan areas, right? So in the trucking business, there's a lot of Sikh people. There's a huge Sikh community in trucking. And, at the end of the day, they're Canadian. They see what Jagmeet is helping Trudeau do, and they're fed up. And they're fed up that he's become an embarrassment to their community. And as I've said many times on Twitter, Justin Trudeau is the most racist person to ever hold office in Canadian history. And if you need to, I can send you some links, the background of blackface and what that actually means. And Jagmeet, Sellout Singh, is helping to prop this person up. So by definition, Sellout Singh is the second most racist person to hold office in Canadian politics. And I don't care if he wears a turban or not. You're still a racist pig, and everybody in your community knows it, especially those truckers who are Sikh, who I'm friends with some of them. Many of us have known many of them for many, many years, because they're not new to the trucking industry in Canada. They've been there for quite a while, and they're aligned with us. They're not aligned with Sellout Singh or Blackface Trudeau.
Okay. But it is interesting, though, the fact that we had the convoy, it ended, we've had the aftermath, and now we've got a whole bunch of other protests. So the opposition to this government has only grown over time. Maybe they're not using trucks like they were before, but they're showing up in numbers and they're getting in these politicians' faces. Thank you so much for coming on the show once again, Benjamin.
My pleasure as always, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Benjamin Dichter. And let's take a quick commercial break now. Back with more on News Talk Saga 960 and the Mark Petronis Show after this.